Welcome to Lunch with Legacy Leaders, a weekly talk show with local and national thought leaders on issues impacting the Black community. Now introducing our host, Ms. Anne Marie Sorrell.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Lunch with Legacy Leaders. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us this afternoon. We have, as always, a very exciting conversation, but it's so timely this week. There's so much that has happened in the last couple of weeks. But before we get started with our broadcast, I want to thank our sponsors for making this broadcast possible. So thank you to Broward Health, AARP, the Florida Lottery, and the African American Black Alzheimer's Disease Institute initiative at the John P. Husband Institute for Human Genomics, University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. If you or someone you know is experiencing loss of memory or memory problems, please contact their research team for more information at 877-686-6444. So I'd like to go ahead and welcome our guest today. We have Ms. Suen Robinson, who is a former prosecutor and trial attorney, Mr. Andell Brown, Esquire, founding partner at Andell Brown and Associates, who's also a trial lawyer and legal analyst. And we have Mr. Zedrick Barber II, Esquire, at the Barber firm. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for being here. So today we are going to be discussing, an issue that I feel like we're just always having to discuss every few months, and it's about the legacy of injustices of Black women and men when it comes to law enforcement and our interactions with law enforcement. And so, but before we get started, I want to just kind of quickly go over your bio so I can formally introduce you to our audience. So just bear with me a moment because I have three of you here today. So Suen Robinson is the founder of Frontline Law and has served as lead counsel on hundreds of trials in private practice and as a former prosecutor. As a defense attorney, she uses her years of experience as a prosecutor to skillfully and aggressively represent her clients in federal and state court. As of counsel for Ben Crump Law, she handles all high-pro civil rights cases in the Southern region. She's the lead legal expert on true crime series Wrong Man on Stars. She was named by Black Enterprise magazine as one of the top 10 Black female lawyers you should know, and was listed in Super Lawyers magazine for 7 consecutive years, and has received congressional recognition for her service to her home state of Florida. Congratulations on all your accolades, Suen.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Andell Brown Esquire, founding partner of Andell Brown and Associates, trial lawyer, legal analyst, has also been featured on Fox News, HLN, MSNBC, and ABC. He's an award-winning founder of Andell Brown and Associates PL, a boutique law firm defending freedom, restoring the injured, and protecting our rights. Andell Brown has experience in research, trial techniques, and top-tier client advocacy skills to resolve tough legal issues in the areas of criminal defense, civil litigation, traffic, misdemeanors, felony cases, civil rights litigation, contracts, nonprofit management, federal cases, and entertainment law. Congratulations to you as well, Andell, on all your accomplishments.
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome. And Zedrick Barber, who is from my home area, West Palm Beach, is a leading attorney with great legal prowess and acumen dedicated to seeking and obtaining justice. His practice expands throughout Florida with an expertise in wrongful death, personal injury, insurance litigation, criminal misconduct, and business litigation. Zedrick studied political science with a concentration in law at Florida A&M University, yes, best university on the planet, and later earned a Juris Doctorate degree from FAMU's College of Law, where he excelled academically and led a number of local and national organizations. He's a member of the Florida Bar Association and admitted practice in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. Zedrick is the principal of the Barber firm. The firm was founded in 2014 on the principles of hard work, integrity, and honesty. He has a proven track record of fighting for full financial compensation by any legal means necessary. So welcome. Oh, and also Zedrick is a past board member of Legacy's 40 Under 40 Executive Board of Directors and currently serves as a board member of the Omega Uplift Foundation. So congratulations to you as well, Zedrick, and welcome to all of you again to Lunch with Legacy Leaders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's dive right in. This week, we had a guilty verdict, on all three charges in the case of George Floyd's murder. So I want to get each of your thoughts on the case and the verdict, and what do you think the next steps or the what's to come? Because there are different analysts that are saying that he may not get enough time, depending on the judge. There's an opportunity for an appeal. So I want to kind of get each of your thoughts on this case. So I'll start with Suen.
Sure. The Derek Chauvin trial, basically the prosecution team set the bar for all future police excessive force cases in the country, which is very important because in the past and what we had seen prior to this case was very lackluster prosecution, no kind of chutzpah, no kind of vibes behind the prosecution. It was like, well, you guys said he's got to get prosecuted, so I guess we'll do it. A lot of times the state wouldn't even call expert witnesses. They would say things like, we're going to rely on cross-examination. There would be no officers testifying on behalf of the prosecution at all. So there would be no one to juxtapose against an officer defendant claiming that they were in fear or whatever they did was reasonable. So I think the Minneapolis prosecution team raised the bar so high by calling 45 witnesses in the state's case and having not just expert witnesses, but the best experts in the country to testify for the prosecution. And then, of course, the blue wall of silence that we all know so well really came tumbling down in this case. And the chief of police, Arredondo, testified. Other police officers, the lead training officer for the Minneapolis Police Department testified. The EMT that just happened to be on scene testified. The 911 operator was like, yeah, I saw this, thought something was wrong, felt like a snitch, but it was pretty bad what I saw. So I think that the prosecution really went to the lengths that they need to in a case like this to prove that there was misconduct, that it wasn't reasonable, that he wasn't in fear. Things that, lay people are all looking at the video and saying, duh, but in a court of law, you have to prove it with evidence. So I think the prosecution did get a just verdict, but it was because they put in the work and the time and got the witnesses, got the experts, got the right evidence to demonstrate to the jury under the law that what Derek Chauvin, he needed to be held accountable for. In terms of the sentencing, the highest charge he has, the second-degree felony murder, is 40 years. Under the Minnesota sentencing guidelines, because Derek Chauvin doesn't have any priors, his max is around 12 and a half years. The state already has announced their intention to argue upward departures, aggravating factors, the fact that a 9-year-old was present when the crime was committed, the fact that Derek Chauvin is a police officer and abused his authority during the commission of a crime. So Derek Chauvin has already waived having the jury make the determination on those aggravating factors that could give him more time. He has relinquished that right to the judge to make the decision on the aggravating factors and whether or not it's going to add more time to his baseline of 12 and a half years. So, it's really going to be on Judge Cahill. He was up and down. I think he did a great job in jury selection, allowing jurors who said they're aware of systemic oppression, they have positive thoughts towards Black Lives Matter. He didn't exclude those jurors. So I was giving him all the props during voir dire. But then he made some calls that I didn't agree with, and even bringing Maxine Waters into the case and, alluding to the defense that they would have grounds for appeal based on what Auntie said. I wasn't with that. But I'm hoping that, he, as the judge, he was exposed to evidence about Derek Chauvin that the jury was not. He knows about Derek Chauvin's past, his past transgressions as a police officer. things that the jury wasn't exposed to. And so it's interesting that it's going to be in his hands, being that he has more information about Derek Chauvin than the jury does. So I'm sitting and listening with bated breath for the 8-week mark to come, so we can see what Judge Cahill will do.
Absolutely. Zedrick, what are your thoughts?
Well, I want to be cautiously optimistic, right? So I hear a lot of us talking about how justice has been served, but I want to caution everybody to understand that while this is one form of accountability for one particular officer, I don't necessarily believe that justice holistically has been served. As to Suen's point earlier, this is a system of racial and systemic oppression against many of us African Americans in this country. And until it's dismantled in its entirety and built back up from the ground up, we'll always have to be concerned about other officer Chauvins. I always say, the dope game, cop game, same game. And what I mean by that is that, you can arrest a dope boy on the corner, but by the time he's put in jail and ready to post bail, there'll be another one there to replace him, right? And so we can lock an officer like Chauvin up, but at the end of the day, Chauvin works within the system. And so he's therefore replaceable and interchangeable. And unless we address the system holistically, there will be another Chauvin put in his place. And, it'll put us in the same position we were when we first heard about George Floyd. And if you, have been paying attention to what's been going on lately with Dante Wright and the young lady who was killed, I believe it was yesterday, perhaps the day before, up in Minnesota as well. I'm sorry, in Ohio as well. So it's a great thing that Chauvin was held accountable for his acts. He should have been held accountable for his acts. It's well overdue that officers like him in his position are held accountable for their acts. But now we have to also, focus on holistically dismantling the system so that we can build it back up to be a system that supports and, looks at all of us equally and holds everyone accountable under the law.
Absolutely. Andell?
When I look at this verdict, Anne-Marie, I think we have a unique combination of transparency and accountability that has opened the door for justice. In this case, due to the people on the scene and the quick thinking of a teenager, we, all of America, were allowed to see that video of what Derek Chauvin did. They saw his attitude. They saw his callous behavior. They saw the fact that George Floyd was handcuffed and that he wasn't moving. He had stopped resisting, and Derek Chauvin continued to keep his knee on his neck. It was an image that America could not deny. They could not turn away from. And because of that type of transparency, it led to accountability. When we look at the initial police report that came out, they spoke about things such as, well, George Floyd suffered a medical emergency and et cetera, et cetera. When we saw that video, it was a horse of a different color. When they went into the trial, I think as Suen so ably pointed out, the prosecution used all the ammunition at their disposal. It seems as if when you have people of color on trial that are being prosecuted, the state is a lion, but when it comes to the officers, they become a lamb. In this situation, we saw them go after Derek Chauvin like they would go after anyone else that was accused of such a serious crime. And I think the decision was the right decision. I think that it sets a precedent of what can happen when we have transparency and accountability. That is the thing that causes many of the cases where we have officers on trial for questionable killing of people of color. They get to escape because they have the power of the pen. They write the reports. They have the power of the badge. They make the arrest. They have the power of the gun. Life and death is in their hands.
Wow. Well, that brings me to the next point. We've suffered the murder of Dante Wright and Makaiah Bryant. Very different encounters with the police. However, the same unfortunate outcome, which resulted in the death of these two young people. So what are your thoughts on both of these cases, especially given the circumstances surrounding the two? And do you think that, in your opinion, how do you think that justice will be served or not in either of these cases?
I actually went to Minnesota to support the George Floyd family during the trial, and
Okay, there you go.
okay, right when I arrived in Minneapolis is when I got the alert about the protesters being near the place where I was going to be staying for a brand new case. And so what I can tell you as someone who works in civil rights space and police excessive force cases is that the timeline for action on the part of all the agencies is getting shorter, and the timeline is getting shorter because we're in the streets. People are in the streets. After Dante Wright's case happened, the protesters were in the street within hours. So there was no time for the police to release a statement saying, you know, we'll release the video in a few days, give us time, we need to do this, the officer needs due process, all this stuff. They were like, oh, these people are organized and ready to go. And that's a credit to the Minnesota community, having just gone through a year of trauma with the George Floyd case and being an international touch point for Black Lives Matter right now. But the organization and the timeline becoming shorter is what is going to, in the current criminal justice system that we're functioning under right now, is the, I guess, the benefit or the plus of what's happening. So you have to remember, Dante Wright, was shot, and we were at the table with the prosecutors within days for her to be charged, for Potter to be charged within days. That's not, that to me, again, dealing with these cases, dealing with families nationally, hundreds of families, I can see the progress. So I get that people generally on the streets are like, nothing's going on, people are still getting hurt, and that is correct, and that is true. But I think that under the current system that we have, the timeline is getting shorter. We're getting convictions, we got a conviction, which only 1% to 2% of police excessive force cases result in conviction. But it takes a lot of time. You have to think back to 10 years ago with the Trayvon Martin case, where it was so novel for the media to even care, for the media to even run the story that, he was killed, to today, where it's headline news, it's Frontline news, it's staying in there. We're staying with the families, we're supporting the families. And most importantly, even when the media is gone, the community is still supporting these families and saying, listen, we're going to stick with you until we get justice, until you get until the criminal case is tried, and until, if they pursue a civil suit, until that's completed. So to me, it's getting there within the system that we have. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about tearing down the system and completely reimagining policing, which I'm an advocate of, and I think is crucial and important. The current policing, modern day policing, is based in slave catching. So the way that they're trained and what they're told they have to do, and maintaining control over suspects, and taught to be more in fear of people in certain neighborhoods and things like that. All that stuff has to go in order for us to build new into a policing that is made for the community, that actually makes the community feel safe instead of afraid. But I have to give credit where credit is due to the organizers and the protesters. Obviously, Dante Wright's case and the new case have a different set of facts, but the bottom line is that we live in two completely different Americas, where a Black person calls the police for assistance and they could end up dead for calling the police for assistance. Whereas, if they go to a white person's house to deal with an issue, they're going to de-escalate and use every other kind of tactic they can before they get to deadly force. And that's the bottom line. And that's all we're asking for. We're not asking for anything special, better, or different. We're saying, hey, treat us with the same respect and dignity that you treat white people with when you respond to a call, when you do a traffic stop, when you're investigating a case. Treat us with the same respect. And I think over time, with the reform issues that are happening and with actually taking away some of the responsibilities from police officers, like having to respond to mental health calls, domestic violence calls, and things like that, taking that away from, they're basically trained almost military style. Most of their training is dedicated to, shooting, martial arts, maintaining control over a suspect. It's not psychological things like how to talk to someone, how to do, they're not a lot of their training is not dedicated to that. So then they shouldn't be doing it. I mean, for me, and I always say this, if the current modern day policing was a product in America, like a consumer product that you had to purchase, it would already be off the market. It's so expensive. It costs so much money. They kill 200 to 300 people a year. It would already be off the market. But because it's such a foundational issue, it's difficult, but we're doing it and the momentum is there. So I just encourage everybody, to take the momentum from a verdict in George Floyd's case and keep moving and keep organizing and, keep having these conversations, keep working with allies and keep taking action.
Absolutely. Zedrick, what are your thoughts on these two new cases?
First of all, the tragedy. There's no reason in my mind for Dante Wright to be dead today. There's no way that you can convince me that that officer believed at the moment she pulled that trigger that she was holding a taser as opposed to her service weapon. We can see in the video, how things transpired. We can see in the video what was going on. And I don't think she didn't look at Dante like she would look at her child, or like she would look at a child from her neighborhood, or like she would look at a child that she's more familiar with. And I think that goes to Suen's point that these officers aren't trained to think critically. They're trained to react. And most of their training, the overwhelming majority of their training, is tactical weapon training as opposed to social interfacing and dealing with people from a humanity and from a human level. And so what you see is that manifesting itself in the way that they deal with people on the streets, African Americans, people of Latino descent, even Asian Americans. And so it's important that we not only look at these things as a case-by-case basis, but if we look at it systemically, and that we do all we can to continue to put feet to flames so that we can dismantle the system and, as Suen was saying earlier, build it up from the ground up.
Absolutely. Andell?
Yeah. When I look at these cases, I think it's important to remember why we're here, right? We have a government, we have a police department in order to serve the people. We're not here to serve the government. The government is here to serve us. And when I look at what is happening here, the government job, they keep people honest. They make sure you don't rob, you don't steal, you pay your taxes, et cetera, et cetera. It's the people's job to keep the government honest. And I see the people putting the pressure on the government officials in both of these cases. And we don't think of the police officer on the beat as a part of the government, but that's really what they are. That's the state that's telling you whether you can go here or go there, stop here, I want your information. Why does the government have to be in our business if they don't belong there, if it's not serving us? When we look at the tragic cases, the tragic deaths of both of these individuals, I think what Suen touched on is very important in that we are moving faster towards investigation, we're moving faster toward release of information to the public, and we're moving faster to convictions, or rather charges, in the cases where it's appropriate. And I think the people continue to keep the government honest by putting the pressure on, making sure that we are seeing what's going on. They can't hide these videos anymore. We had the case of Laquan McDonald where he was shot 16 times. The police report said one thing, but the camera showed us a whole different thing. It took lawsuits and years of litigation to bring that evidence before the public. When the public saw the video, that's when the officer was charged. Now we have to keep the pressure on the powers that be and make sure that transparency and accountability are always the order of the day.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears to individuals. You know, when you take off your attorney's hat and you go out about your day-to-day, your leisure Saturday, where you're just trying to just be great and just be a regular person, right? There are times where we're going to interact with law enforcement, whether we're being pulled over. And I think a lot of times we have, you know, we've educated the community in some instances on how to, you know, interact with law enforcement if you're pulled over in a traffic stop. However, what we don't quite understand and know our rights is when we have to interact with law enforcement in other situations. It could be something you get caught up in at a gas station, I don't know, or in a case where you have to call the police yourself. Like you said, Suen, I had a personal instance where, you know, I was with a friend and, you know, she was in a relationship and her person was going through this breakup, and he like left the house. She did not know where he was. She looked and saw that he had taken the gun out of the case. So at that point, it was like a very scary situation. And for hours, we were trying to call, text, no response. And so we were like, oh my God, we got to call the police. And it was the scariest moment for both of us to call the police, because we were like, well, we got to let him know that he has a gun, right? He may be having some type of mental thing going on. So, you know, we had to disclose all of that within this call. But even when they showed up, it was a few of them that showed up, like 5 or 6 cop cars, right, to go search for him. And it was very terrifying because we didn't know what was going to be the outcome. So and here it is, we're the ones who called the police, right, to look for him for his safety. So how do we deal with that in our community? What are our rights? How do we address situations when we have to interact, whether we're calling the police on someone else for their safety or their protection, or because they actually did something, or even for our own situations? What are your thoughts on those? And Suen, we'll start with you again.
I work in a group on Clubhouse that I co-founded with another attorney. His name is Lee Merritt. He's a national civil rights attorney as well. And we were talking about this exact issue in the room. And we had a moderator say, we have to stop calling the police. And I'm not willing to go that far, okay? Because sometimes you just really, there's security issues, and it's not a joke. But definitely, and then somebody else said, when you have to call the police, have your white friend come over, just trying to be like, what can we do? But I think it's so important, if you do have to engage with law enforcement, just trying to communicate. It's almost like we have to be trained to de-escalate and be trained in law enforcement language, as opposed to them coming to the scene with the proper training and skills to deal with whatever we have going on. I definitely feel like if you have a security issue, like what you were talking about, then absolutely you have to call the police. But I'm not encouraging anybody to put themselves in danger. But if you have a situation, a family situation or something like that, you gotta really sit down and decide, what you want to do. Because you don't know who's going to pull up. You don't know which officer, if you getting a Chauvin or you getting Officer Jerry or Terry Jerome, like you really have no idea. And so you have to almost do a secondary evaluation, like you said, like, okay, is this going to make the situation worse or better for me in the current environment? So that's why even with traffic stops, and we've discussed it before, like, pulling into a safe area, calling 911 when you're getting pulled over, to tell 911, hey, I don't know what's going to happen here, so I'm just trying to put you guys on the line. I mean, if you feel like your instincts in that situation, that there's a concern, you definitely need to call non-emergency or emergency and ask for a supervisor. Sometimes I've had my own situations where I'm interacting with the police officer completely in a calm manner, and they start telling me to calm down. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and call the supervisor because I am the most chill person in the world. So if you're telling me to calm down, something's going on. Also, asking them if their body cams are on, because sometimes just humans, they forget. And if you remind them, like, hey, is your body cam on? That kind of too helps them to de-escalate, like, oh yeah, this is going to be reviewed at some point. Maybe I need to take it down a notch because my body cams are on. But definitely, trying your best to interact with whoever appears to be the most reasonable on scene is the best thing to do. And advising them if there are weapons, if you have a weapon on you, if anyone in the area does, if there's one within arm's reach, immediately upon them approaching the scene, so that they're aware, so that later on there's not an issue of, well, we didn't know X, Y, or Z was happening, or X, Y, or Z was in the area, and that's why they made a snap decision.
Wow. Whew. Zedrick?
Yes, get yourself a master's degree before you do it.
Right.
And I think it's important that we first acknowledge that it's not the everyday citizen who's trained to deal with the police. It should be the police who's trained to deal with the everyday citizen.
Absolutely.
And so the onus is on law enforcement, right, to apply the training that they should have received and should be continuing to receive as they continue throughout their career on the citizens that they're helping, protecting, and supposed to be serving. But with that said, one thing I always try to encourage people to do, first of all, let's just acknowledge that what we're all talking about here, Anne-Marie, what you were dealing with wondering whether or not you should call the police, Suen, what you were dealing with one telling you to calm down even though you are in a calm state. That's trauma, right? So we have a level of post-traumatic stress that we've been dealing with for literally centuries, right? Not just since the inception of the slave patrol, but even further before that. And so it's important that we recognize our own traumas, right? And try to calm ourselves down when dealing with law enforcement. And I think it's also that law enforcement begin to recognize that we're not just being non-compliant, but we're literally manifesting trauma that's within us, right? But with that said, I always try to encourage people to be ready, right? And it's a sad state that you have to literally be ready. I saw a post on social media the other day where there was a sign in the yard where a family literally posted a sign and said, hey, an autistic man lives here, right? He doesn't understand your commands, right? He doesn't understand, doing exactly what you're telling him to do. And oh, by the way, he's also Black. It's a sad state of affairs when we have to literally contemplate doing things like that, but that's where we are. And so what I mean by being ready is if you're in a car, right, you want to make sure that all the information is within arm's reach, that you can reach and grab it before the police officer gets out of his vehicle. What I mean by being ready is, I shouldn't say we all, but many of us have cellular phones that have recording devices on them. One thing that I've seen personally and with many of my clients is that once a phone is pulled out, an officer begin recorded, many of them start to recognize, wait, there may be consequences for my actions. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that causes them to act in a way that's appropriate and lawful. And so a lot of times, that recording device, whether it be a video recording or an audio recording, can be protective of the person that the officer is dealing with. And if it's not protective, right, let's say in an unfortunate circumstance that it isn't protected, it's certainly a source of evidence that might be used against that officer later, right? We saw it in the George Floyd's case. We're seeing it in other cases throughout the country. The fact of the matter is officers don't always turn on their body cams. And sometimes it is the citizens who have to do the reporting. Just as an anecdote, my grandmother was sent to the hospital this past weekend. And she fell twice Sunday morning, and the EMTs showed up twice. First time they showed up, she refused to go to the hospital because the hospital that they told her they would send her to was one known for historically discriminating against Black people. And so it wasn't until I was called and I was able to rush over there and speak with my grandmother and confirm that she was able to be sent to the hospital that she wanted to go to, that she was willing to even agree to go to the hospital. right? Now, truth be told, she was in a much better position in the hospital, even with the historic discrimination, than she would be at home. But that trauma, right, prevented her from even being willing to go. Now, on the way to her house, this is a personal experience. I'm driving and I notice a police officer in my rearview. And at that moment, even as a lawyer, right, even in an emergency situation, I was forced to contemplate whether or not I'm breaking the law, whether or not I'm doing something that might give them any reason whatsoever, right, to pull me over and harass me. That's trauma. So, it's an unfortunate set of circumstances and an unfortunate state of affairs that we're in. But we have to be mindful of what we're dealing with. We have to put the onus on law enforcement and our government officials to also be mindful of what it is we're dealing with and do our best to get home.
Andell.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that we have to even have a conversation about being in a tough situation and should I call the police or shouldn't I call the police? But it is a reality that we must deal with. One of the things that I think really matters that we need to understand and for the community's sake should be done is we need more policing that reflects the communities that they serve. A lot of times when people are in high stress situations, they're going through things, sometimes the way they express themselves is not perfect. The everyday person may be, very anxious about whatever they're experiencing. And some officers may perceive that as threatening behavior, as aggressive behavior, and sometimes it's just a cultural difference. So I think one of the things that we need to invest in is community policing. We need police departments to work with the community, to reflect the community. We need more people of color in law enforcement. We need people to have the training. We need people to have those jobs so that when they come, they understand who they're dealing with. I think another thing that we should do is make sure we do as much as we can to make the playing field level. Accountability and transparency. You have a Ring doorbell, sure, officer, let's talk right in front of my door where my camera can capture what's happening. Ask about the body cameras. If you have to have an encounter with an officer, be in a place where there are a lot of other people to see what's going on. If you're being pulled over, pull over to a well-lit area where there are other people there. I think those are some of the tools that we can use on our behalf, and then also deal with it on an institutional level. Who are our officers? Who are the officials in charge of where we live? Are we engaging with the people that are making decisions about who's policing our neighborhoods? Are we making sure that those people reflect us? I think those are some of the things we can do to make our encounters with police officers better.
Absolutely. And thank you all for definitely sharing your insight and tips on what we can do personally to try and protect ourselves during an encounter with law enforcement. Now, we talk about police reform of our criminal justice system, adding community policing. Of course, there's still many law enforcement departments that don't use body cams and just so many other policies. What is it that we as individuals in our community, so actually it's two sides. What can we do individually as relates to those types of policies and reforms? But then also, I think we also have to take a look at, even our communities itself as the community. What can we do to ensure that people are knowledgeable, educated, I know it's not on us. I know you said that, Zedrick, but what else can we do? I know protests are great, but what else can we do other than protest and educate? Is there anything else? And then as it relates to policy and reform, what's our responsibility on that?
I think it starts with the legislature. I think we have to start at the top with the laws and the way that they're written. I think qualified immunity is a very important issue for us to look into that keeps officers from being held accountable. Police Bill of Rights, which we have in the state of Florida, means that there are a number of different special privileges a police officer has when they're being investigated for doing something wrong. We need to decide as a community whether or not that is helping us or hurting us, and we need to do something about it. We saw recently Governor DeSantis put in place that he pushed for the HB1 legislation, which will make protests and other things like that, people that are protesting in a certain manner in certain places, subject to felonies. Elections have consequences. We need to make sure that the people in power are responsive to our needs, that we're educating ourselves and informing our communities about the types of laws that are being passed, because a lot of these things occur on the legislative level. By time something happens on the street, the job is already done. So I think one of the things we can do if we want to have real police oversight and accountability is work on the legislative level and deal with our local and state government officials.
Absolutely. And that law.
I agree with.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think it was signed into law this week.
It was unfortunately signed. I don't think it's a good law, but it was signed into law this week. And I think we have a lot of work to do in fighting against laws that are not there to help our communities, but actually hurt our communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with Attorney Brown. I think that engaging the legislature is important, and being educated and voting in non-presidential elections is so important, because I understand, our community is socialized to focus around, presidential elections, but judges, mayors, commissioners that become mayor, some cities have the mayor is the chief of police or the highest law enforcement official. So if you're not voting for your mayor, you could be possibly allowing someone that doesn't have your community's best interest in mind to be the top law enforcement in your city and not even realize it. So I think understanding, and being engaged civically is important, but also, and I always talk about this, jury duty, so important. And we don't talk about it enough. I know now because of COVID, there haven't been juries, but the court is opening back up and people are going to start to get called in. And it's not just showing up for jury duty, but it's also not deselecting yourself from the jury by saying things like, I don't think I can be fair because I had a bad interaction with a police officer before. So I can't sit on a jury because I had a bad interaction with a police officer. The understanding that because you've had a bad interaction with a police officer, that actually informs you and would help you be more fair, because you're able to look at a police officer's testimony and anything they're saying as just as a human, because you interacted with them as a human and seen that they're not perfect, and your actual experience actually informs you and would make you a better juror and that you can be fair. But understanding that, understanding systemic oppression, being Black in America, these things don't exclude you from serving as a juror. These things actually educate and inform you to be a better juror, because you can be more fair because you understand the dynamics and what's in the situation. I can't tell you how many times as a trial attorney doing voir dire, having teachers say, oh, I can't serve on the jury because I have to do testing. My kids are in testing. I can't stay here because I teach at a predominantly Black school and I need to be there for my kids. And I'm sitting there like, well, my client is a Black kid and he needs you right now in this courtroom, but I can't say that, so that's why I'm saying it now. Okay. Because I can't say it during voir dire. We have a constitutional right to a jury of our peers. So we owe it to each other to show up for jury selection, to not deselect ourselves, and to understand that our life experience informs us and teaches us so that we can be fair in these cases, because the current system that we have involves jurors, and jurors are the judges of the facts. And if we don't show up for jury duty, we get deselected from these cases, we're not going to be there. One of the critical things in George Floyd's case that's not receiving enough attention is the diversity of the jury. Hennepin County is only 17% minority Black and brown. That's the statistic. So for the jury to have 5 Black people is like they have more Black people on the jury than the percentage of the people in the actual whole town. So it's a very diverse jury, but that makes a difference because diverse jurors have diverse life experience, can talk to each other during deliberations and say, hey, just because George Floyd is a big Black man doesn't mean he's a weapon, he's a threat, he's on the ground. You have people on the panel that can give different perspectives and actually have a conversation with each other and not just be having one perspective. And that is really a game changer. I was saying from the beginning that the defense in George Floyd's case lost the case at jury selection. Once they had, a 50-something-year-old Black nurse, I was like, y'all are done, because she knows that that's not a heart attack. She's seen a heart attack before, and I'm sure she's seen drug overdoses before. Y'all not going to get Auntie to believe that George Floyd had a spontaneous heart attack. Like, she's going to be back there like, y'all.
So it wasn't carbon monoxide?
Like, no.
I'm going to go with Dr. Rich on this. We can take a vote, but yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Jury service is so important because everything you've been through, your life experience is what informs you and enables you to be a fair juror. So I just encourage people to look at jury duty as something we do for each other instead of a pain or time away from work or time away from friends. Look at something that we're doing for George Floyd, that we're doing for Makaiah, that we're doing for Dante.
Thank you for that, Suen. Zedrick, what are your thoughts?
So,
what should we be doing?
There's not much more I can say after what Andell and Suen has just said, right? They hit all the points perfectly. Only thing I would add is, though our system that we have currently isn't perfect, it isn't even great. It's the one that we have. And unfortunately, at this point, money becomes a factor when it comes to elections. And so I know that we don't all have the means, but those of us who do have the means, there are some candidates out there who have very viable opportunities of becoming elected that want to see the same things that you want to see. If you have the means, mobilize, meet before the meeting, and donate to these campaigns and see if you can get and help with them in advertising the policies that they want to push forward. If you can't give in money, give in your time. Help with their campaigns. Talk to your friends, talk to the individuals at your church, talk to individuals at the barbershop, wherever it is that you congregate. Let's not make politics taboo, right? There's a long standing belief that religion and politics is something that we should kind of stay away from and not discuss. But the fact of the matter is politics is life and death, right? So if we aren't willing to discuss the policies that the politicians are willing to put forth, then it's kind of hard to have anything to say when we see tragedies like the ones that we're seeing occur every day continue to occur. So donate if you can with your money, but also if you can't donate with your money, or even if you can, also donate with your time.
Absolutely. Well, as we wind down, what is the one takeaway that you want to leave with our audience? And if someone wants to reach you, how can they reach out to you? So we'll start with Suen.
Oh, my one takeaway is show up for jury duty, please. Don't deselect yourself. You can be fair. You can be fair. You can be fair. And if you need me, you can hit me up on all socials at Not Just a Lawyer or at the office, 954-399-2746.
Awesome. Andell?
Well, I want to leave the people with the thought that you're not powerless. You are the answer in this situation. It is the power of the people that convicted Derek Chauvin of the murder of George Floyd. The people that stood there and took the video, the people that said this isn't right and stood up, the people that showed up and testified, the people that served on the jury, the people that protested and put the pressure on the system for transparency and accountability. The answer is us. We are the answer for the problems that are facing us, and we can do things. We've talked about a lot of different practical steps that we can take to help ourselves and empower our communities, whether it's being involved on the legislative level, whether it's making sure we are informed, and our communities are informed, that we're discussing strategies. We're making sure we know who are the people that are making decisions in our lives. So if anything I can leave with you, it's that you are the answer. We are the answer. The power is in our hands. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me toll free at 1-888-39-AB-LAW, or you can just, Andell Brown on Google will usually find me, Andell Brown Law on many of the different platforms.
Awesome. Thank you. Zedrick.
Just as I said initially, we're starting to see progress as it concerns to accountability, but justice is on the horizon. I'm cautiously optimistic that if we continue to keep the flames, that if we continue to apply the pressure, if we continue to mobilize, if we continue to stand up, speak out, that we'll, eventually get to that point where we can say justice is served. Equality is good, but equity is always much better.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for all the information that you've imparted on us this afternoon. It's a wealth of information, and it's unfortunate that these are the conversations that we have to continue having. That we have to be so cautious and have a whole guideline on how to conduct ourselves to interact with law enforcement, as well as how we train our community and our children to interact. So it's my hope that one day this conversation will be null and void. So until then, I thank you all for all that you do in our community. Continue to fight the good fight with us and for us, and continue to just really impart your knowledge on, those of us who you can. And, thank you again for joining us. I'm going to do a few quick announcements if you just stay with me for a moment. So we want to thank our sponsors, Broward Health, AARP, and the Florida Lottery, as well as the African American Black Alzheimer's Disease Initiative at the John P. Huntsman Institute for Human Genomics, University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, for making this broadcast possible. Congratulations to all of our honorees, our 2021 honorees for the most powerful and influential Black business leaders. If you have not picked up your copy, you can definitely view the publication online at miamediagrp.com. Also, please remember to tune in to our show Soul, hosted by none other than Miss Nikki Jellin, every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. as we disseminate intellectual entertainment on fashion, arts, culture, relationships, mental health, and food in South Florida. Please mark your calendars. As always, please share this video because there's someone out there that can benefit from this information. And tune in again with us next Thursday at noon. Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.